Access to medical care is becoming more and more of an issue here in Guam, and it doesn't even matter if you have the ability to pay. It's getting harder to see a doctor, to get an appointment, or to get the specialty care that you need. So I want to show you a growing solution to a growing problem. They're going to go out of their way to help find you a solution. And they've been growing their clinical services. Aside from this place looking and feeling homely, like this is their waiting area. Like, I don't think that people really understand that they do full clinical services here. Like, this is one of their clinical rooms. Look how nice it is. You get your vision exam here. So do you need to see an OBGYN, get family medicine done, internal medicine done? This is all stuff that's done here at the Total Guam Foundation. And just to tell you again, this place is not for profit. This is the psychologist's office. Yes, they have a psychology department. They also do psychiatry. It's an entire mental health department that they have here on top of all the other clinical services that they provide. If you need medical care, if you're having problems getting a doctor, getting an appointment, call the Total Guam Foundation at 649-TODU or 649-8638. Good morning and welcome to this new week. This is the Sunday News Analysis. It's the morning show with me, Troy Torres. It is 8:04 a.m. on Sunday, July 19, 2026. I'm amped and ready to go on Sundays because this is my first day of the week. For many of you, it's the same. For some of you, tomorrow is the first day of the week, and you know that's okay. I might not have that much of a pep in my step because Saturday is supposed to be my day off, but because of the whole Bavi thing, I'm not able to take Saturdays off throughout this month. So I'm just going to have to hustle it through, right? And hopefully be able to take Saturdays off in August. God willing, right? Maybe in this super El Nino year, it's all bets are off, right? We don't know what 1 week is going to look like over another week in terms of what the weather is going to be. And that's one of the subjects that we're going to talk about today is there an Invest 90W that is growing as a threat for somewhere in the Mariana Islands? We're going to talk to Landon Aydlett about that. I also want to bring you coverage from the Guam legislature. I think this was on the 17th, if I'm not, no, I think the 16th, the 17th on Friday. Senators have been in a scramble because they set for themselves a deadline that they've already passed. It's not a legal deadline, but they told themselves that they wanted to pass the budget by July 17. They weren't able to do that. So in their scramble to get to things and to rush through things, they have been going through different amendments. And a budget is one of those things where by law, senators are able to attach riders. I don't know why they're called riders. I want to say it's because they ride along with things that don't. So riders are basically these bills that they have throughout the year, or even new bills that they have, right? They attach it to the miscellaneous provisions of the budget. It has almost nothing to do with the budget, but they use this opportunity to pass a bill or to pass their proposed bill more quickly because it rides onto the budget. And the budget is like the most important thing. And so, when senators weigh things out, even if they don't agree with certain things in the miscellaneous provisions, if they agree with the budget, they're going to vote for it. And so essentially they vote for these new statutes, right? So there's a couple that I want to bring to you, and it is about raising the threshold for procurement from $25,000 to, I think it's $250,000. And that's for all the other agencies. And then there's another one that raises the threshold to $499,000 for the Guam Department of Education. Both weighty proposals, both proposals that should have never been included in a budget and should be considered and deliberated by the legislature separately. And the legislature, they considered it. And this is, I've got to tell you, I'm highly disappointed in the Guam legislature. This is not going to turn me off from voting for some of these people. For some, yes, it's turned me off from voting for them. But I'm still disappointed in the legislature and how it's handled this budget. Anyway, we're going to talk about these two things. But let me just tell you just a quick story before we cut to the break and I get Landon Aydlett on the phone to talk to us about Invest 90W. I went to 6 a.m. mass for the first time in like forever, and I cannot, I've been to 6 a.m. mass in Jigo before because I know that when Father Paul was there, it was fully in Chamorro. But I went so every third Sunday of the month, starting this month, Father Val, our parochial administrator, he is he has coordinated that every third Sunday of the month, we are going to give for communion both species of Jesus Christ, the body and the blood. And so today was the first time that we're doing it for this year or for this monthly thing, and I got assigned to be a Eucharistic minister on the 6 a.m. mass, and I just wanted to share. There's nothing newsworthy about this or anything like that. What I just wanted to share was how beautiful it was. How beautiful it was to listen to Chamorro songs, Chamorro church songs that either I haven't heard in a long time or I haven't heard ever in my life. And I think synergy is the wrong word, but that's the best way I know how to describe it. The synergy and the spirituality. Everyone was singing. Everyone was participating. It was a community. It was a community in Christ. And I just wanted to share how that made me very happy. And that's how I started my day today. Anyway, when we come back from the other side, oh, there's a fly. When we come back from the other side of this commercial break, we're going to have Landon Aydlett on the phone with us to talk to us about whether there is an Invest 90W and whether we need to be increasingly prepared for it. Stick with us.
Good Morning Show with Troy Torres is brought to you by 76 Circle K Guam.
Welcome back to the Sunday News Analysis. My name is Troy Torres. It's now 11 a.m. on Sunday, July 19, 2026. Biba Birin del Carmen, the Diocese of Chalancanoa, is celebrating the patroness of Saipan and the Mother Church of the CNMI. Biba. Welcome to the show, Landon Aydlett, meteorologist for the National Weather Service Guam office. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning, Troy. How are you doing today?
I'm a little tired because I have to wake up really early, but I feel good. I feel good. But I can't be as tired as you guys are, so.
Well, we're tired of dealing with nature.
Well, tell us about nature. What's going on?
Yeah, right now we're still tracking the 90W, and the good. I think I mentioned yesterday that it was looking like it's facing some existential crisis. Really since Friday afternoon, and that continues. The development just has not been taken shape with this 90W. And as a matter of fact, the Joint Typhoon Warning Center this morning degraded it or downgraded it from a low for development to sub-low. So it's no longer on the Joint Typhoon Warning Center homepage, but it's just indicative of the struggles it's had over the last 2 days, really, to get its act together. And so that's one thing we say about these disturbances. When they're developing, two things can happen. It will or it won't. And this one so far has not. And so 90W is still sitting there. It's more of a open wave trough this versus a circulation or a poorly organized circulation. Okay. It just has been fighting these battles with the wind shear, the atmosphere, plus starting to interact with the circulation closer to the equator and just south of the equator. that's now pulling the surface westerlies across the region. So good news for us. It's not a dire threat to us, but we will be watching it as it remains in the region. Long range forecast models still spin up a number of scenarios later in the week and toward the weekend. But again, these are all within the realm of speculation. And I say that because until there's actually something at the surface starting to organize and develop, any long range solutions from the forecast models are still speculation. There's just no credible threat, and that remains the case. So when I say that the only recommended actions are to stay tuned to weather forecasted trends and maintain a general preparedness, that's exactly where we are.
I feel like this is more than deja vu. I feel like I remember that Brandon and I were having conversations like this in the early days of Sinlaku when it was Invest, I think it was 97W if I'm not mistaken, that it was struggling to form near the
Correct.
Marshall Islands, and then it just became something. Yeah. Am I remembering that correctly?
Uh, we're still in the speculation phase, and some of our most notorious typhoons, they develop in this disorganized state. They all come from a disturbance, but not every disturbance develops into a typhoon. Um, and sometimes this period of speculation can go for days, if not weeks, of the forecast models trying to spin up something before something eventually does happen.
Okay.
But again, we see upwards of 150 tropical disturbances in a given year, and realistically, only develop into typhoons or tropical storms. And so this is where I say when you see a disturbance up there on the map, a 90 something, don't stress, because that doesn't guarantee a typhoon or a super typhoon is going to be coming our way. But it's just something that's being watched that could develop, but it's not guaranteed.
Are the conditions all there for something to develop and move this way?
Well, right now, it's been dealing with that wind shear for the last several days, and that's mitigated any potential with this 90W. And we see that from time to time, and eventually the upper level wind patterns, they shift and it becomes more favorable. So there is a disturbance there. We start seeing that development, but right now it's just not in a healthy environment. That could change today, it could change tomorrow, but more realistically, it's going to be later this week before we start seeing something more credible take shape. And it may not be right here in True State with that 90W. It may be another disturbance closer to Yap. There's a lot of scenarios, a lot of possibilities at this time.
Well, if it originates as a storm closer to Yap, doesn't that become less of a threat to the Marianas unless it just drifts north?
Yeah, absolutely. Typically, we can relax a little bit if it's in Yap State when something develops, but don't get me wrong, things can move toward the northeast. I think it was Typhoon Andy in 1989 developed in Yap State, was moving northwestward initially, and then started curving through eastern Yap State. That's just southeast of Guam as it was moving northeast as a powerful typhoon. And so these things are possible. The most general trend for tropical cyclones is moving toward the west-northwest. While it's the most likely scenario, that's not always guaranteed, and it really depends on a number of factors. But again, right now, looking into the next couple of days, we definitely look like we're in better shape for Liberation Holiday for Monday and Tuesday. You can relax and enjoy the festivities and events at that point.
What festivities, Landon? I don't think there's any parade. No, there's no carnival. I mean, it's just gonna be 2 days off. That's all it is.
Yeah, I know there's no parade or not the traditional parade or the carnival, but I know the mayor's council has a number of events planned, a lot of them indoors, but I think there's still other events going on for Liberation Day. So check with your local office for those details.
Yeah,
But I know things are in the works.
The poor mayors, they weren't given enough resources to pull off a whole parade and to have a carnival. So, I mean, it just, sorry, I know this is not the weather, and I know we're politicking now, but I'm pissed because I'm 46 years old. All my life, except for a couple of times, except during the pandemic, and I believe it was as a result of Chataan, or it was some storm. The only time that we never had a parade or carnival was when we didn't have festivities was when these acts of God came upon us. And the reason I mentioned my age isn't just to exemplify how long I've been around, but also that I have a connection to the greatest generation that was liberated. My grandparents are
Yeah.
from that generation that was liberated on July 21, 1944. And it just pisses me off to no end that we're not having festivities this year, or that the festivities have been dulled.
Yeah, I can't answer to that, obviously, but definitely I can sympathize with it because we do want to remember that generation for the work they did in liberating the islands. Certainly some atrocities back then. And so we have to do our best to honor them in any
Yeah.
and every capacity as we can at this stage. And it doesn't have to be through a parade. But one thing I've urged people, I think an old friend of mine who has since passed away, she's seen my Paradise Gem in my early years on Guam. He told me about his time during the liberation era. And I said, please, whatever you do before you pass, write down your memories, your stories and stuff, get it written in a journal because these memories have to keep around. And so for people listening to your grandparents that were here back then, have them write their stories, question them, write down those details because we have to keep those stories alive for generations yet to come because it's going to be forgotten so quickly. And I think that's how a lot of us can remember that day, that era, even without a parade or a carnival, and make it more meaningful through those stories.
Well, at least the government in Guam can't blame the weather and can't blame the National Weather Service for this one.
I'm not going to comment on that one. I know they've had some challenges with Sinlaku and Bobby, and my gosh, the Marine Corps drive route has been wrecked twice now because of these typhoons. So I know those are just some of the compounding factors that's led to that decision, and it's we're battle weary, that's for certain. But I think regarding this 90W, we are in good shape. We're going to still have to watch this. This is the classic wet season pattern. We have these southwesterlies surging across Micronesia, and things can and do change very quickly in very little time with these weather patterns. And that's the nature of wet season in the Western North Pacific. And so, like I've been saying for a while, stay tuned to the forecast. Right now, we look in good shape.
Hello.
So stay up to date and maintain that general preparedness.
Thank you so much, Landon. I'm assuming we don't need an interview tonight. Maybe we can wait till tomorrow morning for an update.
Yeah, I think we'll be in good shape tonight. I just don't see any changes over the next 18 hours,
Okay.
but we can definitely tag up tomorrow morning just for a general update.
Cool. Very cool. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, and God bless you.
Absolutely. Talk to you soon, Trey.
All right. Bye. That was Landon Aydlett with the National Weather Service, giving us what sounds like good news, at least for now. The Joint Typhoon Warning Center has downgraded Invest 90W, as in it should no longer be appearing on their screen, from low to sub-low for potential for development into a significant tropical cyclone within a certain period of time. But that doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. There are a bunch of different forecasts that show different things. What it does mean is that we're still pretty far away from anything happening, if something does happen at all. But we can just keep praying that nothing will happen. And you know what? I want some normalcy, because whenever these typhoons come, like, my stress level goes through the roof. I'm a fat boy, so I gain more weight because of the stress. Well, it's because I'm eating because of the stress. I'm off of my diet. I'm off of my exercise. The gym is closed. The power is off. I mean, it's just one thing after another. And I know that my problems are first world problems and that there are people who have much bigger problems than me. But I'm just saying, this is that's what this storm stuff does for me. And I have to imagine it's something of a hassle and stress for everybody else. So it's nice to hear Landon Aydlett talking about how this thing has not dissipated, but has been downgraded, and that all we really need to do is pay attention to updates from the National Weather Service, and they'll help us to figure it out. When we come back from the other side of the commercial break, I want to bring you footage from Friday's session of the Guam legislature, where they moved to change thresholds in the procurement law moves that should not be made as riders to the budget, but as separate legislation. But anyway, let's bring that to you on the other side of this commercial break. Stick with us.
P174 2, Senator Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This amendment is to adjust the small purchase threshold for any procurement to go from $25,000 for supplies and services and not exceeding $100,000 for construction to $250,000, may be made in accordance with small purchase regulations promulgated by the Policy Office, which shall include the requirements and request form of RFPs and whatnot. And so this bill is part of a series of just reforming some of our procurement laws, because these old figures are from a previous time, a previous era, when procurement thresholds and inflation and cost of everything was significantly lower. But now, with things becoming much more expensive to procure, the thresholds have, I would say, changed and need to be adjusted. One of the things that I have noticed in this body is that, depending on the agency and its need, we're more than happy to switch it to this $250,000 figure for certain agencies. And I agree with those adjustments for those agencies for the same reason those senators advocate for. But I would advocate, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If this is going to be good for other agencies, I say we just standardize this across the board so that we have a more uniform procurement and everyone is operating under the same rules and assumptions and ideas behind how to move forward on small purchases. And I really think this is a good bill, because I don't like the whack-a-mole way that we're doing it right now, where an agency's problems got to get bad enough before we say, okay, we're going to adjust your threshold to this $250K based on best practices by the feds. And that's fine and all well good. But again, if it's good for one agency, it's good for all of them. And we have procurement issues across the board. And so I think this is a good amendment to make, and it's an amendment that is necessary not just for efficiency's sake, but just to acknowledge the reality that prices are changing. They're never going to go back to what they were in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. And I think we need to grapple with that, with the adjustment of these small purchase threshold. So I ask my colleagues to please support this amendment, because otherwise we're probably just going to be back in here in a later session trying to do it for an individual agency when we should just do it for all of them and be done with it. So with that, Mr. Chair, I ask my colleagues for their support, and I yield the rest of my time.
On the amendment, anyone wish to speak on the amendment? Senator Perez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for the prop for this amendment. What is his calculation for the inflation adjustment?
Do you yield, sir?
No, I don't yield.
Okay. The senator does not yield, Senator.
Yeah, so I did the calculation, and really my calculation is 40,000 based on inflation changes. But I know during the public hearing, there was testimony provided by the Chief Procurement Officer from Department of Administration. They crunched some numbers and did some data collection, and they recommended, based on the number of procurements within the government of Guam, they recommended a 50,000 threshold for small purchases of goods and services. And another question for the proffer of this amendment: Did you receive testimony from DPW?
Does the member yield?
I don't yield.
The member does not yield, Senator.
Okay, so from my understanding, there was no testimony from DPW. Question for the proffer of the amendment: what is the importance of DPW's testimony?
Does the member yield?
I never yield, sir.
Member does not yield.
So this is an issue. You know, we're walking blindly into an amendment without information. And for the listening audience, I took the courses in procurement under the guru himself, Attorney John Brown. Has the proffer of this amendment taken any procurement courses?
Does the member yield?
No yield, sir.
The member does not yield.
Okay, so here's the issue with this particular amendment. It conflates two things. It conflates supplies and services and construction. And so let me give you a little education. So the way the centralized procurement system works, it's divided between services and goods from construction. And so this amendment treats those two categories the same. So you're raising the procurement small purchase threshold for both different categories. I'm going to ask the question of the proffer of this amendment: why is that? What's the rationale behind giving the same threshold for two categories?
Does the member yield?
Negative.
Member does not yield.
So again, we do not have the information. This is, to me, it looks as if that the proffer of this amendment wants to just ram this amendment through without the information that's needed from DPW, who oversees a critical part of our government procurement, which is construction. The other thing, the assumption behind the proffer of this amendment, I mean, just listening to his opening remarks, is that if we increase thresholds, we're going to improve the procurement. Okay, so maybe you are going to speed up procurement, but you're not going to get the best value. So if we're here in this body, we're appropriating excess revenues to bring it down to almost zero. You know, what this is doing is it's enabling higher expenditures within government when we should be being more fiscally responsible. So if we are to make changes in procurement, it has to be done with careful consideration, with data, and not hide behind not knowing what the impacts are. You know, I agree that there should be some adjustment, again, but based on data, and the data provided by the practitioners of the experienced people in this government recommend 50,000 for goods and services. And so because there was no testimony provided by DPW, so my recommendation is to amend the amendment to increase, instead of deleting 25,000 to 50,000 and keep it at 100,000 for construction, and just strike out the 250,000. That's what is provided by the testimony. So I would like to make this amendment to the amendment.
On the amendment to the amendment.
Objection.
There is an objection. Any conversation on the amendment to the amendment? Say again. Senator Perez, could you please repeat the amendment to the amendment?
So my amendment is to change, okay, so basically unstrike the 25,000 and in its place put 50,000. So maybe I could go back. Unstrike everything that's struck out, and then I would amend that to, so 50,000 instead of 25,000 for supplies and services, and not exceeding 100,000 for construction, and then strike out the 250,000 based on the testimony provided.
So everybody understand the amendment to the amendment? On the amendment to the amendment, any discussion? Senator Tydegui, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, good morning first to my colleagues and to those who are listening. Thank you so much for tuning in and watching how your taxpaying money is being spent. Mr. Chair, you know, I totally respect the amendment to the amendment by this particular author who's taken the time since she has been in this legislature to actually attend the courses at GCC on procurement. I've met with her many of times, as well as I was going through the procurement classes. I've done all my modules, my 4 modules as well. And there is a total, you know, definition between supplies and services. And so my question would be to the author of the amendment as a whole, Senator Parkinson, okay, the author, did he speak with GSA before making this choice, or did he go directly to the agencies? Only because agencies, if they had their choice, they would want $1 million, you know, ability to spend. And that just can't happen. You know, you're putting these agencies will be putting us into debt. And there'd be a lot of shenanigans going on in that way, you know. But so my question again, you know, is just simple, Mr. Chair, if he should yield to that question. Did he speak with GSA with regarding to this?
Does the member yield?
Yeah, I'll yield to that question. The impetus for this amendment did not come from any conversation with GSA. It came from harmonizing it with the federal statute that's already there. I believe one of our colleagues yesterday did a similar thing for the hospital, raised the threshold to $350,000, I believe it was, based on the federal guidelines. And so what I'm doing is just trying to get that procurement for everything else closer to that more established threshold. You know, the costs are up significantly. We heard testimony that just buying linens over at GMH costs more than $25,000. And so I think that really goes to show the necessity for moving these thresholds, not just for the hospital, but for every agency, because we need to acknowledge the reality that we are never going to have 80s, 90s, and early 2000 pricing ever again.
Thank you for that. Also, Mr. Chair, I would like, if you can yield to as well, is DPW informed of this as well regarding the, you know, making it one amount instead of separating it from services to contract, because that's a huge difference and a much bigger amount when it comes to contract versus services and supplies. Were you able, was he able to talk to DPW?
Does the member yield?
I don't yield to that question.
The member does not yield.
Oh, okay, so no?
Yes, the member does not yield. That's no.
Oh, okay, so DPW was saying no. You know, I've no problem to the amendment to strike out the 25 to 50, but I was hoping that we would allow that increase as well to the construction part, because we all know prices have gone up considerably. And I understand what the author of the original amendment is trying to do, because nowadays it's just so expensive, and it continues to rise. Inflation seems to be going a lot faster these days than it did in the past. But I was hoping that the proffered amendment to amendment would raise the $100,000 construction to maybe $200,000. So we increase the 25 for 25,000 to 50, and then increase the construction to 200,000. I don't know how we're going to do this, Mr. Chair. If you can give me some guidance with this, because I know we can't do an amendment to the amendment of the amendment, right?
That's correct. So we have to stick with just
maybe
this amendment.
maybe I could, if this amendment, Mr. Chair, if you can guide me, if this amendment does not pass, the amendment to the amendment, it does not pass, do I have an option to make an amendment to that?
I think you need to preserve your time at this point.
Oh, so I can try it then. Okay. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just speaking on the amendment to the amendment right now. I haven't had a chance to speak on the amendment as a whole.
Correct. So when you go back to the main, if this doesn't survive, then you can proffer that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Amendment to the amendment. Senator Burnett, you're recognized.
Sidus Masia, Mr. Chair, Manana Sidus again to the people of Guam. You know, I support the amendment to the amendment, and I think it's interesting that it appears we're all in agreement on the need to increase this threshold. But if the author of the amendment is going to refuse to answer questions about, you know, how we came up with it or what different agencies have thought about it, I think it just goes back to the root of the problem with this amendment and a few others that we've entertained in this budget bill is that these conversations, the appropriate place to have them is in a public hearing setting so we can hear from all the different agencies and, you know, hear from them. And I'm very sure, like Senator from Tamuning said, if it was up to the agencies, their small threshold limit would be $1 million plus. You know, so I'm not necessarily opposed to the idea of increasing the threshold for small purchases. We've done it for the Guam Department of Education. And, you know, some of the facilities, people supported it because it allowed them to make, you know, small purchases at a higher threshold quicker so that they can get resources out to the schools. But again, this is a conversation that is more appropriate to have in a public hearing setting so we can hear from the agencies like GSA. You know, I'd love to hear from GSA what are the potential risks with increasing the small purchase threshold. But with that being said, I think that we have consensus in that we agree that the threshold should be increased, and that's a great starting point for a conversation on a bill that, you know, we should have a public hearing for. And so that's, I support the amendment to the amendment because it is in the spirit of compromise, but just generally I think that this conversation would be better had and should be had in a public hearing so that we could get all of the agencies together, especially if the author is not going to yield to just basic inquiries about the amendment he's proffering. So, Sidus Masi, Mr. Chair.
On the amendment to the amendment, anyone else wish to speak? Seeing and hearing none, on the amendment to the amendment, there is, you may close, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, you know, just because you raise this threshold, the small purchase threshold, it's going to make money go out faster in the door. It's not going to bring better value to the government. So this particular source of selection is basically you get 3 quotes, and you may not even get 3 quotes. It's a little bit less competitive and less transparent. And to raise the threshold to above what the recommendations by our procurement professionals recommended, it goes against, you know, common sense. It goes against prudent fiscal behaviors. Because what could happen is that there may be, you know, increase in cost to government. And we don't want that here. We're here to rein in the, you know, make sure that the government is functioning effectively and efficiently. And most importantly, making sure we're utilizing precious taxpayers' dollars in a way that serves the best purpose of everyone here. Again, small purchase source selection is not the most transparent means. And, you know, we hear oftentimes how, you know, procurement is mishandled, how we're overspending and not controlling our expenditures because the way we handle procurement, when we could be getting better value. And what the data shows is that 50,000 is reasonable. And by my calculations, it matches the inflationary change from the time that this was last changed. And I believe it was changed during Senator Tom Atta's time. And so to say that if it's, the federal government, why don't we just copy the federal government? It's already available to us. Any federal funding that we receive, they can abide by the federal small purchase threshold. So having to increase it is redundant just to see, it's redundant because the federal government already covers us in those respects. But Guam is not the federal government. We don't have the huge budgets. So what that means is that we have to be more fiscally responsive. And we're told we're going to come across an economic cliff in 5 years. And we're reducing the amount of surpluses coming into our government, which means we need to control the processes of how we spend money and get better value. And small purchase is not the way to do that. So I think that, the 50,000 is a happy medium for small purchases. You get 3 quotes. But above that, there's IDIQs where you can get better value for those blankets than having to rush and spend up to 50,000. And again, we hear from the public auditor, there, many audits, that there is a division, artificial division of procurement of small purchases in order to go under that threshold. But the answer is not increasing threshold. The answer is IDIQs to get the better value. And what that means is that we can stretch our dollar further, get what we need. We run into the risk of purchasing up to that threshold, but not getting everything that we need when in fact we could do it a different way and not through the small purchase method. And so that's why it's important when you're making any kind of amendments to procurement that you understand what you are doing. That services and goods is not the same as construction. That federal procurement is different from local procurement for good reason. And so this is one of the issues that I'm seeing with these procurement changes in our policies.
Thank you, appreciate it. On the amendment to the amendment, there has been an objection. All in favor indicate by raising your hand. Motion fails. Back to the main amendment. Anyone who has not spoken, Senator Tydegui, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do support the increase of small purchase threshold. I mean, I'm doing that later on too in the legislation for the Mayor's Council at their request. But before I did that, I made sure I talked to GSA. And of course, the person sitting in the Mayor's Council right now as the director actually worked for GSA for many years and has a wealth of knowledge and understanding of the process and knows the importance of procurement. So, but she never, as we talked, we never looked at increasing the construction side of it. And, but being that said, I kind of made an argument while I was talking about the amendment to the amendment, keeping it separated between the two. And, the procurement threshold, this reflects the real world of what we're doing business today. And services implies inflation and shipping costs, and Guam's limited veteran pool means that the current threshold often forces agencies into a formal procurement process for the routine of low-risk purchases, and that's under supplies and services. So that, and it basically, Mr. Chair, when you're looking at construction, by contrast, construction is a high risk, high dollar, high impact category. And it involves engineering standards, safety requirements, change orders, bonding, and long-term liabilities. So as you can see, there's a huge difference between the two. So raising the threshold here without careful separation would expose the government to cost overruns, favoritism concerns, and basically weaken the public's trust. So, you know, the difference, to give you an example, sometimes it's easier to do an example. Like, for instance, there's a $75,000 IT or $50,000 IT service contract, and it doesn't carry the same public safety, engineering, or liability risk as you would get from a construction project. Thresholds should reflect the risk, not an arbitrary dollar amount. And this also helps when it comes to audits being done when they're going through these contracts for services versus contract. So I'd like to make an amendment just to keep that in place and providing, so my amendment would basically strike out the 25 to make it 50,000 and double it, and then also on the 100,000 to strike out 100,000 and make it 200,000. So we're looking at doubling both areas for services as well as construction. Yeah, services and contracts versus construction. So my amendment would try to stay in the same perspective of all other agencies when it comes to being able to have those abilities of recognizing what's high risk, recognizing the weaknesses that both sides can cause, especially when you have a higher amount on construction. So that's my amendment, Mr. Chair, and I ask my colleagues for their support. I know that the author of this amendment always looks at, you know, compromise, hoping to compromise in this situation. And nothing stops us if this seems to be holding or putting a burden on our agencies to move forward with purchases in other areas. But Mr. Chair, I had no objection when it came to Guam Memorial Hospital, no objection to other areas that are the mayor's office where they need this procurement authority right away as they deal with emergencies. And other areas like IT, for instance, you know, that moves so quickly. I mean, one day we have a cell phone that works, has all these gadgets in it, and next thing you know, it becomes obsolete, or software becomes obsolete. Time-sensitive areas that require, you know, a higher procurement. So I ask my colleagues for their support in this and consideration to find that happy medium. Thank you.
On the amendment to the amendment, anyone wish to speak on the amendment to the amendment? Senator Terlau, you recognize.
I think it's a good idea to keep the procurement amount, the small purchase procurement amount for supplies or services that is currently 25, to move that to 50, as recommended by GSA. First of all, because it's recommended by GSA, they saw no need to increase that. They said there was not a problem that would be solved by increasing that. And what would happen, in fact, is that we would decrease competition again in bidding. It very much decreases the number of vendors who are going to get notice of you know, the government's need for supplies or services. And that's what we're trying to balance in our procurement law. We try to balance efficiency or speed, but with value for our taxpayers. It's their money. Of course, maybe some people don't care how much competition is really required, but I think that's what we really need to push to make Guam better. We need to increase the competition in these procurements, not lessen them. And the small purchase cap lessens competition because it only requires the agencies to send out notice to 3 different vendors, as opposed to all the vendors on Guam for goods and services. Just 3. And they don't even need to get full responses from 3. They can say 2 of those had no response. And they're done. And they go with that 1 vendor. So imagine if you're like, there are 6 vendors, and only 3 of them are getting the notices or the invitation to bid on this item. I think we should be doing the opposite. We should be ensuring that whatever flaws we might have in our system, we fix those so that we promote competition and we increase it at every chance that we get. That's the only way we're going to bring costs down, that we're going to save taxpayers money to use for taxpayers' benefit. I think increases are reasonable as time goes by, but I think they should be based on something. And if they're not based on anything concrete, then they're pretty much arbitrary and random. And at least GSA gave us a recommendation that they based on their findings in reviewing their small purchases. Again, we always ask the auditor to audit small purchases. This is what happened during COVID, remember? Because this is where so many of the suspicious procurements come through. They try to fit them under small purchases so that they get less review. They get less competition. Very much less notice is made to the public. And I think that's the opposite of what we should be doing. So I have no objection to increasing the thresholds as the amendment states, but my only hesitation is the 200,000 because we did not hear any testimony as to increasing the construction threshold to 200,000. Construction procurement is actually what we have been suffering the most protests on. So I think there's something wrong with our construction procurement that needs to be solved, and raising the barriers to make it easier for the agencies is not the solution. Increasing the competence of the agencies is the solution. Making sure that they are following the law is the solution so that we do not get protests. Especially for simple things like not being able to provide a procurement record, not making a decision on the protest for a year, and other things. But just to give them more power to go to their special contractors, that to me is the opposite way of what this legislature should be doing right now, without any evidence as to which amount we're going to choose, and especially with the evidence that we have of potential corruption.
Thank you, Senator. That's your time. On the amendment to the amendment, anyone else? Senator, you may close on the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, again, Mr. Chair, raising the procurement threshold really, it's not about weakening oversight, it's about modernizing it. And I commend the author of this amendment for what he's doing, because it's a need. I was hoping that someone would make this kind of amendment, but I didn't realize it was just going to be one bulk amount. I think and I explicitly explained that services and supplies operate in a completely different risk environment than construction. And when we treat them the same, we slow down a government where speed is safe, and we lose control where caution is essential. You know, by separating these categories, we empower agencies to work efficiently while strengthening accountability for projects that carry the greatest public trust and risks. The legislature should increase thresholds responsibly, and responsibility means being clear with its separation as well. And I meant to say, excuse me, sorry, that again, strengthening our accountability for the projects that carry the greatest public risk is what we need to keep in mind. And you know, many of us who've been sitting in here has never even taken a procurement class and trying to understand what you're doing. It's important to do that, and I highly recommend those who haven't to take one, just to, you know, to enlighten yourself on how procurement works and why we put it in place. I can tell you one thing, in my class that I took, we need to change some of the laws in procurement because it could be very contradictory. I'd like to see it come into something that's so easily read that even the average person can go in there and understand exactly what the do's and don'ts you do in procurement. But for now, we do need to increase it. I totally agree with that, and ask my colleagues to put that in consideration. And if we are going to bulk this into one amount, that we do this openly and have GSA in front of us so that you'll make a responsible decision on how to move forward. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
On the amendment to the amendment, is there any objection? There is an objection. All in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please indicate by raising your hand. Amendment fails. On the main motion, Senator, you may close. Oh, Senator, sorry about that. Senator Snorkelstein, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, as I look at this, and I've heard my colleagues speak, I'd like to ask the oversight chairs of two agencies to tell us what is the small purchase threshold. DOE, maybe Senator Borah can yield to that question. Let us know what is DOE's small purchase threshold, and then I'm going to ask for GMH.
Senator Borah, do you yield?
Mr. Chair, right now it's at $250, but they're requesting an increase to $499.
Okay, Senator Montanani, do you yield?
It is $250, but in the amendment that's incorporated into the budget that was passed, it would raise it to the federal level at $350.
Okay, so those are the two increases.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now, you know, I heard earlier one of my colleagues says, why don't we follow the federal, the way the federal is doing it, but at the same time, let's not do it because we're not the same size. Por favor, Gatsu. You don't have to be the same size to do what everybody else is doing. That's number one. Number two, I think one of the comments, I support this amendment, okay? Let me begin with that, or end with that. I support that amendment, the 250. And as we worry about agencies maybe running away, we're going through the budget. Not everybody has $250 to spend on services and supplies. There's do's and don'ts. This is also an election year. Whoever becomes governor in November will tell their agency, you're not, even though you got the limit, you're not going to spend as much because there's no way you can justify it if you only got $1 million or $2 million in your budget. And then we move along. One of my colleagues mentioned the author doesn't want to yield. You know what we're saying tomorrow? Puti timatendi, andi makantutu siya, ati maopyaw, sunguna, move on. Don't cry over that, but that's okay. I understand. Some people just doesn't like that, but it's okay for me. But for as far as this amendment, I support it. I was actually looking for, and I'm going to support DOE's, I'm going to support GMH's increase because it's the way to go. There are two agencies that need that flexibility, not the excuse of procurement. And and our colleagues said that we got some procurement problems. Then fix that, nay. If we got problems in procurement, then fix it. Because whoever becomes governor of this election has that issue on his shoulder to fix it. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I support this amendment. Thank you.
On the main motion, Senator Parkinson, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we're kind of back to a same place, similar place that we were.
All right. I am less concerned about the positions that Senator Parkinson and Senator San Augustine are taking, not because I agree with them, but because it doesn't surprise me. Senator Parkinson and Senator San Augustine have been, for the past 7+ years, pretty in tune with Adeloop. Okay? And I bring up Adeloop because we have seen what has happened with procurement. We have seen what has happened with our money. We have seen what has happened with corruption in the government of Guam over the past 7.5 years. I'm not going to sugarcoat this for anybody. One of the main reasons the Republicans were elected for the first time in 20 years to the legislative majority was to counter that corruption. Yes, part of the reason they were elected was their promise to lower the BPT. But another big reason they were elected was to be a counter to the administration. And they have expressed platitudes over the past couple of years, though their attitude about corruption, they hardly even use, they treat it like it's still the C word, right? But it's there. We know about it. They've promised to have hearings and investigations about the corruption. Nothing. We haven't seen jack diddly squat from the Republicans, from this current legislative majority, in terms of holding the administration accountable. They have been absolutely useless in that regard. But if they truly believed in the fight against corruption, if they truly were with us in our concern about the spending of the people's money by this administration and by future administrations, we would see it in their actions on the floor on this budget regarding these procurement things, regarding the Simon Sanchez High School stuff, regarding anything dealing with transparency. And through, what we're witnessing in this fiscal year 27 budget is the Republicans voting with the administration. The Republicans are the ones who are allowing this threshold to go up. And to be clear, this is not about, because they're trying to frame it in terms of this is going to be more efficient. This is going to make it easier for the government of Guam. You're making it more, you're giving power to government bureaucrats and to political appointees to use our money with far less transparency. That's all this raising of the threshold does. Where for the longest time, in order for you to expend public money up to the $25,000 threshold for products and services, you could go with the 3 quotes. But once you hit 25,000 and you go up, you have to bid it out. Look at the Tiguac Cemetery thing. Look at Comfort Cuts' contracts over at the Department of Chamorro Affairs, where there was bid splitting. Already under the current threshold, you see corruption. Imagine how much more corruption will happen once you raise this threshold. And despite every reasonable and objective argument that some senators were making against these things, the Republicans still voted for it. Highly disappointed in the Republican senators. I don't know whose team they're on, but it certainly isn't ours. And I would venture to say it certainly isn't even their own party. They're supposed to be the party of fiscal responsibility, of fiscal restraint. They are the advocates of accountability and transparency, or at least that's what they tell us when election time comes. But when it's time to put their foot on the pedal, to actually put these platitudes into action, as we're seeing in front of our eyes on the session floor, they are nowhere to be found except to side with the corrupt administration. It bamboozles the mind of reasonable people. And it should disgust all of us as voters. For Kandit News, I'm Troy Torres. Thank you so much for joining me this morning for the Sunday News Analysis. We're going to continue our look into what these senators have been doing with our money, literally billions of it, tonight on the Troy Torres Show. I think that will be at 7:30 p.m. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. God bless you all. I hope you all go to church today.
You asked, we delivered. Guam Auto Spot is extending our overstock sell-off with the hottest deals on island, like our 2025 GMC Canyon with $4,000 off. Or slide into a brand new Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, starting at just $24,995. September is your chance to drive big and save even bigger. Visit us today or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com or call 478-AUTO. Guam Auto Spot, where the savings never stop.
This stuff's hitting the spot.